Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this podcast, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Desiree Rogers on the podcast. She's a CrossFitter. She's also a regionals athlete when it comes to CrossFit. She's coming to us all the way from sunny California, but most importantly, she's our current guest. Desiree, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get started, first of all, in asking about your journey, it pains me to ask you this, but what is the weather like in sunny California right now today?
Well, it's definitely sunny. We actually had a super long period of rain for California anyway, and we were all really upset over here. But it's finally getting back into the 70s and 80s. And yeah, it's been great so far.
World's smallest violin for all the California people complaining about the rain.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I know, I
no,
know. It's
here
terrible.
here we had one day that was 70 a couple days ago, but now they're saying we might get snow tomorrow.
Yeah, it was raining for about it rained for on and off though, but for about like 2 months. And I know that that's like nothing to everyone else in the entire country, but for us, we were sad and depressed and just stayed in our homes.
Oh yeah, my brother moved out to California for a year, but then he moved back because he goes, yeah, I don't have enough money to keep to keep living there. But yeah, he just said it's just so hard to get used to the fact that it's going to be gorgeous out 95% of the time, as opposed to living here, where the summers are amazing, but everything else is just, the polar vortex. It was -60 wind chill here, and you don't want to experience that ever because you're just going to hate life basically. But before I depress everyone, we're going to go on to our main topic. So what really inspired and what motivated you to get into shape and adapt that healthy and fit lifestyle?
Well, I've always had some kind of interest in fitness. When I was young, I tried a lot of different sports. Mostly, though, it's a funny story. When I was about 8 years old, my mom put me and my sister in cheerleading at a rec park down the street. And so the first year we cheered on the boys, and for the football team, it was a flag football team. And that after that season, I went to my mom and I was like, "Hey, mom, I actually want to play football. Can I do that instead?" And she was like, "Yeah, of course." She was super supportive about it. So for the next 4 years, so from age 9 to 12, I played. I was like the first girl on whoever like played football on that team, and so I was on there for 4 years, all the boys getting dirty, and it was flag football, but it was like we were super small and young. But yeah, ever since then, I just knew that fitness and just any type of sport type stuff I was always really interested in. After I played flag football when I was younger, I never really like got into a sport that I fell in love with. I played volleyball in high school, and our team was terrible. Um, Sadly, it was terrible, but I loved it. I had a good time. Um, but it still wasn't like a passion. I graduated from high school, went on to college, and I unfortunately never played collegiate, and I really wanted to, but I don't know if it was like, like I said, my high school team sucked, so there wasn't like access to, a collegiate team, and I was at a D1 college, so, I had all the girls who played volleyball were like 6'4". And I loved running. So I would go to the gym, and honestly, I would like run on the treadmill for like miles and miles. I'd run outside. I would do a lot of trail runs. And when I was in the gym, I would just do like Globo gym type stuff and just lift weights. And, I never really got anywhere. And then after I graduated, I became an EMT. And when you're an EMT, you're surrounded by firefighters and police and all this stuff. And during that time, it was around 2013, and CrossFit started getting kind of big. Like it started getting around. Everyone in the like first responder type of environment would do CrossFit in their exercise regime, and so word started getting around about it. But I still didn't really know like what it really was. So um, I thought that I wanted to be a firefighter, and because that's just what I saw, what I was around. And so in order to do that, I was like, all right, well, I need to like really get into firefighter shape. I need to add more muscle on and all that stuff. I was kind of in sort of shape, but just like I didn't have muscle. And so just took a CrossFit class, and I was like, okay, like cool. Almost threw up my first time doing it. And I remember we were doing like just banded pull-ups and we were doing just regular push-ups. And I don't even think I could do a real push-up at that time. Um, and I remember feeling extremely nauseous. And I know that's like the thing with CrossFit is like you gotta go hard until you vomit, right? So I remember feeling really nauseous. I was like, okay, like that's a really good workout. Um, Hopped around a couple gyms and then I was like, okay, like this is really cool. I'm actually kind of good at it. I picked things up fairly quickly, and then my CrossFit gym was having like a what do they call it? Like an inbox competition. So just with people within the gym, there was a competition, and I had no idea about like CrossFit competitions or anything like that. And I was like, all right, like let's just do this. Let's try it. And once I competed, I was like, this is it. Like I'm picking this up. I'm decent at it, and like there's just so much to continuously get better at in CrossFit. And so after that, I started competing regularly in CrossFit and just kind of became addicted to that feeling.
And that's awesome because just so many people, they aren't able to find that, and you're able to find that early on, just that type of workout that you really enjoy. Because for so many people it's just a struggle finding out what works best for them. I always say you kind of got to be like a mad scientist, just mixing and mashing things and just until you find out what works best for you. But one of the big myths and stereotypes about CrossFit that a lot of people have is that, I mean, I've had so many people come on where I was just like, oh, have you tried like CrossFit or anything else like that before you work out? And then they just go, oh, I don't want to get injured, so I don't do CrossFit, because they just associate CrossFit with a lot of injuries, which is unfortunate because it really isn't true. I mean, if you're untrained and you go into CrossFit, you might get injured if you're not doing things right. I mean, CrossFit is one of those things where you have to have a lot of solid technique. But did you have that fear when you were getting started in CrossFit? And even if you didn't, I bet you hear that all the time. What do you like to say to that when people just say, "Oh, I don't want to try it because I'm just afraid about injuries"?
Yeah, when I first started, that rumor, or not necessarily rumor, but that little caveat about CrossFit was kind of going around a little bit. Um, but that I wasn't concerned about it just because I mean maybe it was because I was young and I thought that I was just completely resilient to all pain, which I know that's not true now. But I wasn't I wasn't too concerned about it. But when other people tell me that, there are a few different things with that. So when you do any type of physical exertion, if you what you're doing to your body is you are purposefully putting it under stress, right? You're purposefully tearing down your muscles so during that rest period you build back up. And the thing about CrossFit is that one, people, it's an addiction, right? Like you get
Let's
addicted.
be honest, yeah, it is.
It really is. You get addicted to the feeling that you get from it. And so, one reason why I think people get hurt is because they just overdo it. They overtrain. They're excited to go the next day, even if they're completely destroyed from the day before. So they go and they just overtrain their body, and it gets injured. And that's just an overuse type thing. You have to really know how to rest your body, really, especially in something like CrossFit where you're using almost every muscle in your body, and you're using muscles that you would never really use during your traditional lifting type training, like in the gym. So those muscles are weak. So they really need time and all the recovery tools or whatever. And another reason I think people get hurt is because they just try to go too fast. They try to um, do too much all at once, right? So all of the fun, sexy stuff about CrossFit is like the heavy lifting and the gymnastics on the rings and on the pull-ups and all that walking on your hands. And people just try to do too much too fast, right? Like it's, if you're going to start a new sport and you're going to learn how to play, football for the first time or gymnastics for the first time, you're not just going to go out there and for the very first time and like jump on the rings and do some crazy stuff, right? But in gymnastics, or I'm sorry, in CrossFit, there's always an RX. It's as prescribed. The workout done as prescribed is called RX, right? And everyone wants to strive to do that. But in order to do that, you have to have all these base levels first, and everyone skips over those. And mostly the reason why those things are skipped over is mostly because they don't have the right type of coach, right? Or an effective coach. It's easy to get your level 1 CrossFit, which is the certification that you need to coach a gym, it's easy to get it, right? It's like a weekend thing, and it's not too hard of a test. Um, and and so like everyone has it. Everyone has their L1, so everyone's a coach. But just because you have that certification doesn't mean that you are an effective coach, right? Like an effective coach will start somebody from the very, very basics, the very bottom, and will encourage them to take those baby steps to get to a bigger movement. And if they don't do that, then they're going to get injured. So there are a lot of things that, people just think that CrossFit can be like, I do CrossFit so I can do all of these movements. Like, you really, really need to take the time to get those little things down first, learn body control, learn core strength, core to extremity, in order to do those more advanced movements, the heavier lifts. Because if you jump steps, you're going to get injured. And another thing is that if you are to compete in the sport, and let's be honest, if you're in any CrossFit class, you're competing just because you want to beat the person next to you, because it's all timed workouts, right? And if you're competing, everyone who competes in any sport gets injured. It's gonna happen. And that's because you're pushing your body to limits that it's usually it's not used to, and you're pushing yourself, which is really good. And if you're going to compete at any higher level, every athlete gets hurt. We CrossFitters get hurt. I'd even go to say less than football players get hurt. Soccer players get hurt.
I would hope that they get hurt less than football players. Yeah,
Yeah, right. I mean,
yeah.
we're not banging our heads against the wall. But everyone has this idea about CrossFitters getting hurt so much and so often, because everyone thinks of it as CrossFit as a workout regime and anyone can do it, right? And that's true that anyone can do it, but not everyone can compete to the level of an elite CrossFitter, and those elite CrossFitters are gonna get hurt, just like any other professional player of any sport.
100%. I always compare it to like CrossFit. The moves that you do, they're not natural to the human body. I mean, let's face it, you're not going to be like swinging around your house doing muscle ups, or you're not going to be doing, like all these plyometrics around your house. So it's like, if you want to take up like running, that's something that you're kind of ingrained in human nature to basically be able to run. So it's easier. But for CrossFit, I like to compare it to, if you just go into a CrossFit class and just start doing the things without the proper training, that's like never lifting a weight and then going to the gym and saying, put 200 pounds on the bench and then let's see what happens. It's like it's not going to end out well. So it's just like everything else, where I mean, it's like, let's face it, you don't get into a car and just start driving. You got to take the classes. You just got to do a lot of back stuff before you're able to get into that, which is what a lot of people don't get. And that's why I say, like, if you're a weekend warrior, you probably shouldn't be trying out CrossFit, because you need to get, just the basics done. And it's all about coaching too. Like, as you say, that goes with like almost anything. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. But one of the things too that I love to bust, probably the number one myth that I ask every single guest on my podcast, Health and Fitness Wise, about this, is that it's gotten better with Instagram, but there's still so many, especially women, that have that fear where if they go to the gym and they pick up one weight or they do one class of anything, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And I always say to that, you'll be the biggest commodity of all time. I mean, everyone and their brother would want to do what you're selling. I mean, I would pay my entire life savings to have you coach me for just one day then, because you would have the total secret. But obviously you didn't have that fear when you were getting started, because you wanted to put on a little bit more muscle to be a firefighter. But I bet you hear that all the time still. How do you respond to that as well when people say, oh, I just want to go to the gym and get healthier, but I don't want to get too big?
Right. So CrossFit will change your body, okay, for the better. But what CrossFit does is it makes your body what your body should look like at the optimal, the way that your genetics was built to make your body look like. And the way, it's hard to explain how I'm trying to say this, but if you weren't meant to have ginormous muscles, right? You're not going to have ginormous muscles by just doing CrossFit. You would have to try really, really hard, specifically to get giant muscles in order to get giant muscles.
And do some other things, let's be honest.
Yeah, do some other things as well.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is you don't look a certain way. You don't have these huge arms if you're not trying to get huge arms. Um, and if you don't want that, then don't do those things that are going to give you huge arms. If you go and do CrossFit, you're going to get tone, right? You're going to have some muscle mass, which why wouldn't you want to have some
Absolutely.
muscle mass? Um, but you're not going to get bulky unless honestly unless that's just what your genetics is supposed to look like. And to be honest, most women aren't I don't have genetics that are just going to look like that naturally. So the thing is if you don't get super strong and giant muscles by accident. That's what I say about
Unless
that.
you're one of those people that I hate, those lucky one percenters where I mean, I had one of them on the podcast where she just like, I was like, there's no way you look like that just doing that. And then she showed me, she had right next to her like a photo of when she was like 10 years old. And I was like, damn, she was jacked when she was like 10 years old. I was like, this is BS. It's like, we're done here. So there are those one percenters, but yeah, it's totally true. I mean, yeah, you're not going to, and it really does bring out your genetic potential. But that leads me into one of my favorite questions to ask because everyone's genetics are different. So when you were getting into CrossFit, what was one body group or body part, I should say, that really, really took off that you didn't have to really train as much because it really just it skyrocketed? And then everyone always has that one body part that lags behind that really just takes a long time to develop. I'll give you mine first. So my back, I mean, I had jobs all throughout college where I was, like lifting stuff into trucks. So I mean, I had, I always say my back is my best feature by far. I could only, doing regular workouts, I only need to do it like once a month. But I'm also 6'3", so my legs are just shot where I mean I could train them, all the time, and they just do not grow. And I get laughed at sometimes because people think that I'm one of those guys that just works upper body and then never trains legs. And I walk in the gym and I was like, no, I promise you I do. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting into CrossFit?
My legs have always been naturally big. So it wasn't difficult. And even when I used to run a lot. So when I ran all the time, typically if you run a lot, you get like your legs get smaller, your butt gets
Yep.
smaller. But my legs never did, so they stayed big, and so it was kind of easy to just pack on some muscle onto those things, and so they just got really big really easily. And that's probably just visually. But in terms of strength, my hip strength and like hip explosion has always been extremely strong. Um, so if I'm going to clean a bar off of the ground, so from the ground up to my shoulders, picking up the bar from the ground, the deadlift is hard for me because my hamstrings aren't as strong. My lower back isn't as strong. But once it gets into my hips, I can pop the bar really, really high up pretty quickly. And I've never had to work too hard for that strength. So that would be that part for me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we hear that all the time, and I always say calves are probably my number one pet peeve. Actually, I mean, that's the one body part where no one has ever trained them, and they can look like that, and they just walk in the gym, and you're like, okay, screw you, just like, and then they always talk about where it's like, oh yeah, it's just like genetic, and I was like, okay, yeah, that is just absolutely ridiculous. But when you were getting into CrossFit, did your body really change really quickly, or was it more of a time process where it took a lot longer? What was your body's main reaction when you started CrossFit?
It's gonna be very fast. Mine was very fast. Like I said, I was never out of shape necessarily. But when I started, within the first 6 months, you see a huge change. I think this is with a lot of people too, because like I said before, you're doing so many things that you just never done before. And so those muscles have never been able to reach their potential. And so they just start growing very quickly. Um, and so I started definitely seeing muscle and just a change overall pretty quickly. And I think that that's been the case for a lot of people who stay consistent within the first 6 months or so, just because it's just so much different and it kind of shocks the body a little bit.
And how long into your training before you said like, hey, this competing that sounds like fun, I should give it a try?
So the first time I just did, I did a little in-house competition was about 4 months into CrossFit. So pretty early on. And then about a month or two after that, there was a local competition nearby. And so that was my first actual like big competition that was outside of the gym. I competed in the intermediate division, and that was just below the RX division. And I want to say there were about 50 girls in that competition, and just in my division, actually. And it was my first competition ever, and I ended up placing fourth out of all those girls. And I was like, wow, this is my thing. Like, I'm definitely going to do this. So that was when I decided, like, I'm going to continue to compete, and it took off from there.
One thing that I find specifically interesting about CrossFitting, especially with the women who compete, is that you look at the top women, almost all of them are from Scandinavia. I mean, it is ridiculous when you think about all these small countries and they produce, some of the best CrossFitters. Why do you think that that region in particular has such a big impact on CrossFit?
There's just some girls over there. It's a lifestyle thing. It's got to be like they're just some burly women. Like I don't know what they do out there. I've never even really been out of the country. I've gone to Mexico once. Um, but it has to be a lifestyle thing and a mentality thing where it's just work.
Yeah.
It's just hard work, and if that's all they know, then that's what they implement into all their fitness training as well.
Well, I'm mainly Norwegian myself, so I think it's part of the genetics too, where they just have, a little bit more of the taller, and they all look like they could be movie stars too, which really pisses me off because I was like, okay, they're all like, it's absolutely ridiculous, but yeah, it's part of that Viking genetics that
Yeah,
everyone talks about. But yeah, it is ridiculous because you look at the top and you're like, okay, it's all Scandinavian people, and like Iceland in particular, it's got like 300,000 people, and they have some of the best CrossFitters, and you're like, just coming from that
yes.
small place, it is just ridiculous. But going into these competitions, what is your diet like, and how does it change from your average when you're just training sort of in the off season? What adjustments do you make to your diet?
It shouldn't change very much. Throughout regular training, you should be eating a lot, or I eat a lot. It's a different style of training where you're doing just extremely high intensity, short durations usually of just high intensity work, and your body just needs to use carbs as fuel. So you want to give your body those carbs to use. Um, the only difference with competitions is that it's sometimes it could be a multiple day thing. And you're doing multiple workouts throughout the day, so you kind of have to be very particular about what you're eating when. You don't want to eat, I try not to eat my fats before or between workouts on competition days, so I will eat most of my fats after the competition is done, at least for that day. Mostly just carbs throughout the day, like just quick burning carbs. So fruits, just, and then of course making sure to get that protein in, but it's the carbs.
So that's why I love having the CrossFitters on, because our bodybuilders, they just restrict themselves so much with the CrossFitters. I mean, you guys just have Carb City, and that's why it's
Yeah.
just so amazing that I always say some of these CrossFitters, they look like they could compete in a bodybuilding show. I mean, the next day after they're done with CrossFit. So it's like, yeah, someone should try that. And I mean, I've had some CrossFitters on where I was like, yeah, I mean, there's a show probably this weekend somewhere you can go and give it a shot. But yeah, it's just so fascinating, the differences in the diet. But also when it comes to these competitions, one of the fascinating things is that you don't know what the events are going to be until sometimes even like the day before or very, very prior to the events. You don't realize what they are. Is that a bit of difficulty for you, just realizing that, you do have to be good in everything? But let's be honest, there could be someone who just gets lucky and only trains for these specific events, and then they just get lucky that those are the events that get picked.
If the competition is programmed well, that shouldn't happen. If the competition is programmed well, um, it should test all modalities. So maybe that person who trains one certain thing will be good on one
Yeah.
event or one day, but it should not happen throughout the competition. Um, and the one of the huge parts about CrossFit is being prepared for the unknown and unknowable. So that's a part of the game, is you just have to be prepared for anything that gets tossed your way, and that's why it's just all inclusive. The training, um, you just have to make sure that you are balanced. We're a sport where you are not an expert, or you're not a specialty in one area. You have to just be good at all the areas. Yes, we all have our specific strengths that you should probably double down on close to a competition. And then there are weaknesses that throughout your training during your off season is when you really should be honing in on those. And then, like I said, when you're close to the competition, double down on those strengths, because those can give you, more an advantage.
When it comes down to competing for you, what do you think event is your strong point, and what event is probably your weakest point?
I so I'm a little bit of a stronger athlete than an endurance athlete. Um, so I mean, there are some crazy strong girls out there, and I'm like nothing compared to those ones in terms of strength. But I think overall, I'm stronger. So if there is and I can move heavy weight. Um, um, I can move heavy weight quickly and for longer, larger rep schemes than some girls. So if there's something like an event that has heavy power cleans and then you do a bunch of other stuff and then those heavy power cleans are like what slows most people down, that's usually where I will get ahead. If it's an endurance type thing where we're gonna row for 3,000 meters and then we're gonna run for 3 miles, which I did in an event before. And then between that was 300 double unders. It was a crazy endurance event, but that wouldn't necessarily be my stronger suit. I think I need something. I need a heavy barbell though, because we include heavy dumbbells and we include heavy kettlebells, and I'm not as strong with those. So maybe I need to do a little bit more unilateral work. But heavy barbells, I think, are definitely my thing.
One of the biggest things that I think isn't talked about at all when it comes to bodybuilding, when it comes to CrossFit, anything related to health and fitness, is the importance of sleep. I mean, you're not going to see that many Instagram posts or anything like that talking about how important it is to get sleep. But I always say I had the number one sleep specialist on the planet call in, and first of all, he was from the UK, and he had one of those British accents where you felt like you gained 10 IQ points just from talking to him. I was just like, it was just like chocolate melting off of his tongue. And I even told him before, I was like, okay, can we set this up where like you talk the entire time and I just listen and basically get like a brain workout just hearing you talk. But he was talking about, the importance of sleep. So for you, especially with these high intensity workouts, the need for sleep is probably greater than it is for someone who's just into regular, health and fitness, just weight training, because your body can just get so exhausted. What's the proper amount of sleep that you try to get? And sometimes when you do get really, really exhausted, it can be tough to fall asleep. Are there any tips or tricks that you use in order to help yourself get those hours that you need?
Yeah, I actually love this question because it's sleep is completely underrated. I heard somebody say on a podcast recently that if people didn't know about sleep, or if you didn't have to sleep and someone just like found sleep, it would be a banned substance. Like
Yeah.
I forget who said that, but it's amazing, right?
Hmm.
It's like it is like I was said earlier, you're purposely stressing and breaking your body down, and so you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to make gains unless you give your body time to recover and sleep. And sleep is just the most concentrated way to do that. Um, and I don't know, this is kind of a plug, but I use my Whoop
Bloop.
to
Shout out
track
to Bloop, everyone.
my and I make sure to get between 8 and 10 hours of sleep every night. And I have the luxury of doing that. I don't have a full time job now. I am in school, and I do have another part time job, but I have a little bit of flexibility with my schedule, so I make sure to prioritize sleep. Um, Sometimes it's like 7.5 to 10, but if it's anywhere below, if it's like close to 7 or under, it's I'm just not okay for the next day. Um, and I just feel that the most difference is I think that my body is kind of prone to aches and injuries, and I think some people are just genetically gifted where they don't feel those as much. I have to be a little bit more careful with my recovery and the way that I train, and so sleep is just one of those things that it's something that I have the absolute control over, but for the most part. Um, and like if something happens in the gym on that, some type of like injury or whatever, like I can't control those things all the time. But like sleep is just that one thing that I can control if I really put an effort into it. So that's just one thing that I absolutely, absolutely prioritize.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an unsung thing because a lot of people just don't grasp how important that is. So that's why I love bringing that up on this podcast. But how is CrossFit as the sport? Because I mean, it's evolved so much. Because I can even remember, back when it first started in like the late 2000s, when it really started to sort of take off. They had the first games on ESPN, and I watched that, and I was like, oh, really? Like, what is this? How has that evolved since when you started? How has it evolved over time?
Oh goodness, so much. I mean, it's such a young sport that like it's in those early stages where just they're still trying to work out kinks. Um, and they're really trying to figure out the right qualification process in order to get to the CrossFit Games, which is the World Championship of CrossFit. Um, and they changed just this past year, actually. There was an open process where everyone in the world had to do an online qualifier for 5 weeks, and then the top in your region would qualify to go to regionals, and then the top at the regionals would go to the games. Um, and and even before that, it was different than that. But they just changed it this past year where now there are CrossFit sanctioned events throughout the world, throughout the year around the world. There are about 15 of them. And so you have to go to a sanctioned event in order to qualify for the CrossFit Games, or there was an open and you qualified through that through a number of ways that I shouldn't go into. There's a lot of detail on that. But
I've done my research. Believe me, I know people. There is a lot of stuff. Yeah.
yes, there's
Yeah.
just so much
Mhm.
that's going into that this year. And that's because it's a transition year. Like, this is the first year they're doing it. And so it's all over the place. And so it should smooth out over the next few years. But um, it gets harder and harder every single year. People just get stronger and stronger. God, especially these girls, like, it's insane the numbers that the girls are putting up these days. Um, and and so it's becoming now more just more difficult to qualify. And I could say, as an athlete, I could say, oh yeah, that sucks. But honestly, it doesn't suck. It's making all of us better. It's raising the bar for all of us. And it's maybe weeding out the people who don't have what it takes. And that's not a bad thing, especially for the sport as a whole.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they come out of this transition year and how things get changed because yeah, like you said, it's just such a young sport that I really think just give it 5-10 years and see where it's at. Then I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. But being a CrossFit athlete too, I mean, you just have such a wide variety of different people that join CrossFit. But we were talking about this prior where I told you, I said, I don't think CrossFit might be right for me because I'm 6'3", so I'm a little bit taller. And then you said that, I mean, anyone can do CrossFit, but there is an ideal body type. Would you like to elaborate on that more just for anyone out there who might be taller like me, who's saying like, CrossFit sounds great, but I'm just afraid, that I'm just a little too tall where like if we're doing like muscle ups, I mean, just a little too tall for just some of these certain movements.
So this question can go two ways, right? So you have people who think that they can't do CrossFit because the way that their body type is.
Mhm.
And here's the thing: is everyone can do CrossFit. Everyone can do CrossFit. Doesn't matter how people in their 80s do CrossFit, right? If you're trying to compete in CrossFit, that's an entirely different thing. Not to say that someone who's tall or really short or whatever can't, but it's going to be harder for someone who is 6'3", maybe, to do well in a high level of competition in CrossFit because there's an ideal body type. For women, I believe it's 5'5", 150 pounds, and for men it's 5'9", 185, 195 pounds. That's ideal. Just like if you were 5'9" as a guy and trying to get into the NBA, it's not as easy, right?
Mhm.
So if you're trying to compete at a high level, there is an ideal body type. However, CrossFit is so broad, right? There's so many different types of movements that even if you are maybe a little bit on the shorter, taller side, whatever, you can still do really well in CrossFit on a competitive level, just because it is so broad. But for people who just want to do CrossFit, just to do CrossFit and not compete, absolutely everyone can do it because the prescription of CrossFit is just high intensity movements, functional movements, and that are just completely varied, right? So, and that's what CrossFit is, and so you can do that no matter who you are because there are just so many different types of movements and workouts that you can put together, and you can personalize it to make it work for you or your grandma or your 10-year-old son or whatever. So it is absolutely for everyone. But competing is a different story.
Now, obviously, another thing when people say the word CrossFit, a lot of people just think about the community. that CrossFit has, because it just seems through social media, through all these other things that people are able to view CrossFit on, the community is just so vast and they're so supportive of each other. How much of importance is that to you, that CrossFit is just such a welcoming and supportive community to all of the athletes?
So that's a big thing about CrossFit and why it works is just because you have so much support. Um, Everyone suffers together, and so everyone understands that suffering, and people just uh, grow together through suffering, right? If you endure something with somebody and it was just you guys suffered together, you're just closer for some reason, right? Like that's just our nature. And when you go to the gym and we have their group classes, and so you're doing it with the group, and everyone goes through the same thing, and so they just understand what you've just gone through. You just get closer, and so that community aspect of CrossFit is it's just so smart. It adds a level um, to your workout that most other workout regimes just don't quite have. And not to mention that, there are movements in CrossFit that other people who do their workout regimes don't really have. And so everyone who does CrossFit they know those movements, that we have our own like acronyms for every little thing, right? Like, so we're making our own language. And it just brings everyone closer, and it just helps you to stay motivated, and it holds you accountable. And again, you just suffer together, and then you just get closer.
Yeah, and it's just like stuff that the military does too, where I mean, yeah, you suffer. If you guys suffer together, I mean, you guys have a lot more of a shared history. So yeah, and that really does show, because it just seems like it's such a close knit community. But two of the questions that I love to ask all of my health and fitness guests that we have on the show. For the first one, I mean, for me, there were so many benefits why I started going to the gym in college, and taking it more serious and working out and getting bigger and stronger. But one of the negative things is you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars. I mean, I'm still at home with my parents for the next few months before I move out, and every single time they come in with groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and bring in the groceries. Has that been a similar experience with you, where people take one look at you and they just assume that you can do favors for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if and just like you said, I have people who are going to move their houses, and they're like, okay, this is a person that we absolutely need to have here. And I'm like, well, am I required though? I don't think so. But yes, that's definitely something. And even something too, when you're out in public, or you typically let the CrossFit body, it looks different than a lot of other people. So I definitely would tell people to, expect people to maybe make comments and things like that, but typically they're positive comments. They should make you feel good about yourself. Like, you work for this body for a reason, whether it be competition or not, but like, you work hard, and if people make comments about it, even if it's like kind of a weird comment, like, especially for women, it's just different, like,
Yep.
you get a lot of comments from people about
Yep.
having a lot of muscle, but I encourage it. I like it, and because I'm confident with my body, and I like the fact that it takes hard work to get this body, and that most people won't do it. Um, so so I'm like, yeah, like, I look this way, and thanks for the compliment, even if you weren't trying.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I say it's so much different for women, because for guys, 99% of the time, you're just going to have people say, dude, you're jacked. And that's going to be it. That's going to be like the
Right.
one thing. So, yeah, for women, it's just so different. So that's why I love to ask that. And I always say, like, for me, it's always a double edged sword with the moving furniture and stuff, because being 6'3", you could have zero muscle at all, and they'd still ask you to do that. So it got to a point where I just had to realize, like, hey, I'll do it. I'll help you out, but it's also them recognizing that I do work out. So it is nice, but probably my favorite question to ask, because like I say, it's a multi-million-dollar idea out there. But for when it comes to, especially women have their own problems with this, but guys have their own problems as well. But when it comes to women in clothing with muscle, I mean, your clothing options can be limited. I always love to say, if you have big, broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend. Jeans are another thing that we hear of all the time, because if you have a big lower body and a small waist, let's face it, jeans are not made for that. So what have been some ways that you have found that you're able to compensate for the fact that your clothing options can be very limited?
Don't wear jeans.
Yep.
Just completely eliminate that from your wardrobe. No, honestly though, I had to, once I found a store that had jeans that fit me, I can't go anywhere else. Like, that's the one place that I have to go. There are companies that specifically design jeans for CrossFit athletes, because we have a particular type of body. So yeah, that's a multi-million-dollar idea right there from them. Um, and I just honestly, I just don't wear anything but my workout clothes. And that's not for everybody, right? Like I go to school, and so like I don't have this job where I have to wear super nice clothes and all the time. But it really is a thing. Like you have to search, and it's not easy. And I've even like Googled, not that I'm getting married anytime soon, but I've Googled like what types of wedding dresses look good with the women with broad shoulders. Like, what do I do? So yeah, it's
You
something
can't
to
go
kind of
strap. You can't have straps on. Basically, that's what I'm gonna say. Then
yeah,
basically, yeah,
yeah. No, I completely
yeah.
agree. But the flip side to that is when you don't have to wear clothes, like right when you're in a bikini, you look great. So
Yep.
doesn't matter.
So yeah, I mean it's great if you're in California, but if you're up here where you can only wear bikini 4 months out of the year, you might want to readjust where you live. Then
Yeah.
I'd say that, but yeah, it's so important, that clothing stuff, because I remember even my own personal story. I came back from after college and I went to a friend's wedding and I bent over to pick something up and my shirt ripped. Luckily, it was the shirt inside; it wasn't the tux, so I lucked out on that. But I was like, yeah, I might need to get some new clothing. But you were talking about how CrossFitters have that own specific body type, and one of the things that I find most interesting about it is that you see these guys and girls that just have shredded abs, but their abs are popped out. They're not like sucked in like if you see like a bodybuilder. Their abs are more protrude from the body. It's almost like they have a belly, but it's a six pack. So it's kind of weird. Like when you look at that, you're like, what is that? Just specific to the CrossFit training where that is the results that people tend to usually get?
Um, I think that a huge part of it is genetics,
Mm-hmm.
but I also think that yeah, I mean, we everything we do is core to extremity. Literally everything that we do. So we're working our core much more than most people are. People have asked me, like, oh, what do I do to get the abs? Like, do I do this specific movement, these like types of sit-ups or whatever? I don't ever do sit-ups. Like I do sit-ups, once a month or whatever in a specific workout, but we don't get our abs from doing ab workouts, right? We do it just from doing all of these types of movements that require core strength and stability. So I think that the reason why they probably maybe protrude a little bit more is because we're not just working on um, the six pack abdominals, right? The rectus abdominis right in the front. Like we're working everything, all of those muscles around it. And so it's everything just kind of, there's hypertrophy in every part of your core. So it just protrudes more.
Absolutely, yeah. All these sports have different body types. You're not going to see a swimmer that's just absolutely, just like a bodybuilder. You're not going to see a runner. I mean, they just produce different body types. But now we go to our audience favorite, my personal favorite part of the podcast, a little questionnaire where we're going to ask our guest here about a dozen or so, I'd say about a half dozen actually questions, and see how our answers stack up to all the other guests that we've had on our show. So for the first question, what is one item that you always need to have in your fridge?
Greek yogurt.
Greek yogurt.
Yes. That one is just there's some people are, like non-dairy eaters. I'm not one of those. Because just some bodies react differently to dairy. But Greek yogurt, it's a staple because it's plain Greek yogurt, so much protein in it, and there's no carbs and no fat, and I could mix it with so many different things.
I gotta say, that's Greek yogurt is one of our answers that we get quite a lot, but one of the most surprising answers that I've ever got from any of our guests, it's been answered 10 times, is mustard, because a lot of these bodybuilders, they just douse it on chicken and rice, because mustard is zero in calories, zero in fat. And I always say, if you have to do that, you might want to reevaluate your life if you're having to douse
Right.
chicken and rice and mustard. But hey, I mean, it gets them their
At least
results. Yeah.
salsa, like
Mhm.
salsa doesn't have that
Yeah.
many, carbs in
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. But now, out of all your followers that you have on Instagram, what would be one thing that you think they would be surprised to find out about you if they met you in person?
Um, Most people just don't know about my school
Yeah.
side of my life. Like I don't post stuff about that. Um, and I'm getting my master's in biology, and I'm doing a project on the kinematics of a feeding apparatus that these little dragonfly larvae have, right? So this is an entire side of my life that nobody knows about. And so that's one thing usually when I tell people about like my whole master's project and my thesis, like that's something that nobody knows about.
When you were talking about that, I was just my brain was just telling me just nod and pretend like you understand what she's talking about, and just say no. And that's amazing. And yeah, I don't think a lot of people, because there is that stereotype of people that just work out all the time. It's like they don't do anything else with their life. But they're so. I mean, we've had doctors on here, we've had scientists too. I mean, it's just so fascinating, these outside lives that people have other than the gym, and they can be some of the the smartest people on the planet. So that's just, and yeah, we have someone who's going to get their biology and their masters in it. And it's like, come on, people. So yeah, and then another question that I love to ask on the questionnaire is, if someone came up to you and said, Desiree, we decided you can change one thing about the sport of CrossFit and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you'd like to see change about CrossFit?
That's a tough question. See, I mean, this might not be what you're looking for, but like, so it wouldn't necessarily be about the sport of CrossFit. It would be what people perceive CrossFit to be. And that's what I was telling you about earlier, was just how everyone always tells me I'm scared to do CrossFit, or I'm not fit enough to do CrossFit, right? Like, and that is probably the most annoying thing to me. And it's not their fault, but I just wish that people would perceive CrossFit in the way that it should be perceived. It should be um, a lifestyle that people use to avoid chronic disease and illnesses. The CrossFit prescription, in terms of fitness, in terms of like a workout regime and nutrition, can actually cure diabetes. Like, it has cured people's diabetes. Um, and it's something that, like I said, an 80-year-old woman can do, and a 5-year-old child can do, because it's just about proper functional movement. And so I just wish that people wouldn't see CrossFit as what the CrossFit Games is, and people would see CrossFit for its health and lifestyle benefits.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of those sports too where it is weird how they view it like that, because like if you watch bowling on ESPN, you're not going to all of a sudden just think, oh, bowling must be. I mean, people just still bowl just for recreation. That can be the same thing. It can be just similar to that, like with CrossFit, where you see sports online. I mean, not everyone's going to be a professional baseball player, professional basketball player, but you can still enjoy the sport and still play the sport. So yeah, I
Right.
completely agree with you on that. But now, if you could work out with any other CrossFitter, who would it be?
Um, I have See, I have quite a few. I wouldn't say idols, because I try to compete at a high level. So, I want to be competitors with them and not like see them as this unattainable thing. Um, but one of my favorite CrossFitters is, this is going to be cliche, but she's the reigning champ, Tia Claire Toomey.
Oh, yep.
Um, and I would love to train with her. And that's because it's so cool. She is what you would call an outlier in terms of body type, body style as a CrossFitter. She is shorter. She weighs a lot less than most CrossFitters. I think she's like 130, 135 maybe. But she has some of the heaviest lifts of any CrossFitters out there. And she's won the championship 2 years in a row now. And she is humble. She just seems to just like put her head down and work. She has a book that she wrote about winning. And she just seems like a very just determined person who didn't let things like her size, right? Like, determine how good at the sport she was going to be. And she just seems like a cool person. So, and she actually trains right now. She trains in um, Tennessee at CrossFit Mayhem, which is like a huge. It's where Rich Froning goes. Rich Froning is like,
Yep.
everyone knows who that guy is, right? And Matt Fraser also, they train there, and Tia trains there. And so I've been there before to that gym to go like drop in, and so it's like I could actually go there, even though she's from Australia. Like, she's not too far. I
Yeah,
could go there.
and that's totally awesome. And now, if you could go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
Mm. Um. So let's see. Honestly, it's like, it's not something that like I wouldn't have to change anything about my 18-year-old self. Doesn't need to change.
You wouldn't say like, hey, invest a couple $1,000 in this stock or whatever, or maybe invest in like invest in like Instagram or Snapchat or any one of those things.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, those would be good ones. No, I just feel like a lot has happened. Like
Mhm.
I've made so many
Yeah.
transitions, and everyone does, right? The early years. I've made so many transitions in what I thought my life was going to be like, and what I thought was right for me. Um, and then in the end, just like everything that just kind of happened was really good for me at the time. Um, and even I like some terrible decisions that I made, it all worked out to where I am now. But I was honestly, I would tell my 18-year-old self to just do more sports, like do more things, try more things that make you uncomfortable, try more things that that put you outside of that comfort zone and test your ability to just adapt to situations. Um, and just do more, even if you're scared, even if you're not familiar with it, just do more things.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Now, our last question of the questionnaire. If we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at? I mean, career wise, CrossFit wise, just personal life wise too. What are your goals that you'd have that you'd like to have accomplished by if we were to talk a year from today?
I I will have graduated by then, so that's cool. And so I want to get a career in teaching. I want to teach college. So eventually, I want to be there in my professional career, I guess you could say. But in terms of CrossFit, I obviously want to compete at a very high level. Um, And so, a goal that I have is to make it to the CrossFit Games. And that's still scary for me to say out loud because I've just recently started saying it out loud. It's always been in my head. Um, but I do want to make it to CrossFit Games. And if that happens in the next year, that would be absolutely a dream and be amazing. I think that I have a lot of work to get there, and that's fine. But I think that where I just want to be is just so much better than I am now. And not I don't mean like I want to have a higher PR in a certain lift. Like I just want to continue to develop. If I am a year from now where I am now, um, that would just be a terrible feeling, right? I just want to continue to
Mhm.
progress.
Yeah. No, and I couldn't agree with you more. And obviously, we see that you're in a gym right now, and you said that you're a part of this gym. Where's the gym located? If anyone, because I have a lot of followers in the California area, if they want to get a good workout in, where can they find your gym?
Yeah, I'm at Gold Standard CrossFit Gold Standard Athletics in Rancho Cucamonga, and so it's about 40 to 50 miles east of LA. And so I'm here 6 days a week or so, hours at a time. So yeah, absolutely, come in and train.
Absolutely. I'll leave a link to all of that down below. And now, lastly, the last question: is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
I mean,
Absolutely.
sponsors.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, well, I have one sponsor in particular that I absolutely love and appreciate just because in terms of when it comes to sponsors, I don't say yes to everybody, and that's not because I think like, oh, I'm too good for these companies. I really need to vibe and like really just connect with the people that I work with. And so even if the company's not big, it doesn't matter to me. It's just I've turned down some pretty big companies, and that's because I would rather be with people who I really connect with and I really genuinely love what they're doing and their company and their vision. Um, so I'm being like long-winded here, but my apparel sponsor Painkiller, and the owners are April and Con. They've just supported me in every step of the way throughout the last year or so. So definitely shout out to them. My boyfriend, of course, Alan Genter, AG the barber. Uh,
How do
I
you get
mean,
the nickname the barber?
well, he's a barber,
Oh, okay,
and
okay,
he's really good at what he does.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he's absolutely supported me in every single way possible. I couldn't thank him enough. Um, yeah, so those are people who, off the top of my head. Of course, there's a lot more,
Oh,
but
absolutely,
that's
yeah.
yeah.
And again, you guys, we cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast. I mean, it was so great having you on and sharing your journey. And yeah, if anyone, again, if there's one thing that I think we could take from this podcast is if you want to give CrossFit a try or any exercise at all a try, any type of fitness, I mean, just go for it because it's for everyone. I mean, you may not have what it takes to compete at the level, but you can still have fun and still get a great workout and good results in it. So just give it a try. And again, you guys, go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below. I highly, highly recommend it. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.